Hello everyone, a warm welcome to all who are here in person. This is something that's completely new from the ways in which we do the Indian Ocean webinar series. As the title goes, it's a webinar series. Those who've been part of the webinar series and those who are online, a big hi. We are meeting after quite some time. We are meeting after a couple of months. This is the third iteration of a very successful Indian Ocean webinar series. I'm really happy that this time, so as to say, an inaugural to our third iteration of what Professor Tejaswini Niranjana and Professor Dilip Menon have so meticulously curated over the course of 2 years, and something that Murari Jha, my colleague, who is an assistant professor at Ahmedabad University, School of Arts and Sciences, along with me, Safwan Amir, we've been coordinating this for a while. It gives me immense pleasure to bring to you two amazing people, really cut out of, the tales that we've heard of. And what I do want to just add, because it is also my responsibility to sort of let you know what the Indian Ocean webinar series does, is to suggest that, look, here is a series that is actually trying to put the Indian Ocean back on the map. While we've focused on the Silk routes, while we have the maritime in its zest, what goes amiss is these intricate connections that are there across sea routes, across the maritime and the nautical. And what also goes amiss while discussing all of that is that particular regions do not necessarily get its due. So if we were to think in terms of margins, we were to think in terms of peripheries, imagine a small little town in South India talking to the large colonial British forces. And this is precisely why we believe that as part of the Indian Ocean webinar series, it is our immense responsibility to get back something even more important, and that is, let's talk about the peripheries once again. And this is something that nobody does, and hence we felt that when Swadeshi Steam came out in late 2023, we believed that this was one of those texts, one of those really important books that needs to be discussed. And rather than our usual format where we have an entire lecture followed by questions, we believed that a book discussion might do much more justice. My task over here is to, yes, obviously introduce the Indian Ocean webinar series. We are hugely benefited from both the Center for Inter-Asia Research over here at Ahmedabad University and the University of Witwatersrand, especially their Center for Indian Studies in Africa. This is based in South Africa. It's a collaboration that has been happening for the past 2 years, and we are in our third year. And the first presentation, the first event under this huge collaboration happens to be this amazing book that has come out, Swadeshi Steam. The author, Professor A.R. Venkatachalapathy, is a known figure for all of you. We have all read, at least works like In Those Days There Was No Coffee, or perhaps something like the book, The Province of the Book, or perhaps a very big book of encyclopedia. And these are not just titles that play around with words, but they are concepts that are really discussing matters that are so relevant and pertinent to our day and age. So without further ado, I am really happy to invite both Chalapathy and Aparajit to the dais. Just a quick word on our discussant, who was also here a couple of weeks back because his own book is out, which is called Engineering a Nation. And this is on the great engineer Visvesvaraya Iyer. And I'm just happy that we have both of them in conversation. And I'll leave it to you, Aparajit. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Safwan, for the wonderful introduction and for setting the context. It's a great honor for me to be speaking with Professor Chalapathy. I've been following his work for many years, since the time when I first started wanting to be a historian. And you mentioned in those days there was no coffee, and being a big coffee aficionado myself, like all good South Indians are supposed to be, it was an eye-opener to read that essay and the other essays around it, which told us that this practice was actually quite recent. I'm being very simplistic, but there's a lot of richness to those explorations. And since then, your work on the history of the book, your work on Tamil cultural politics, on writers, has been very, very, very inspiring. So it's a great opportunity to speak to you. I thought we'd begin with a brief overview of your book. It's a book about a business venture, which is much more than a business venture, as you say, the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company, and about the person who was the soul of the venture, V.O. Chidambaram Pillai. But for the benefit of those who may not have heard about the story, I thought we'd do two things. If you could read out a couple of passages from the start of your book, which introduce this rather remarkable character of Chidambaram Pillai. And then, if we could then briefly lay out the setting and the outline of events before we get into the questions.
Vanakkam, good evening. I'm delighted to be here in this university. It's made especially happy because my student is teaching here, and I can tell you, as a older person and as a teacher, nothing gives a teacher more pleasure than his or her student becoming a teacher and soon overstripping and eclipsing him. So I'm so delighted that I'm here, and I can see that Safwan has won many friends and goodwill in this institution over the last 2 years. So I'm very happy that I'm here. I've heard so much about this institution. I met Patrick French many years ago when he was about to take over as, I think, dean or something of this institution. So this is my first visit to Ahmedabad. I've never been to Ahmedabad. So when I got the opportunity to come here, I thought I would seize it. And so I'm here, and I'm so happy to be in conversation with Aparajit. And I can see so many familiar faces, names. I met Murari many years ago at Teen Murthy. We all belong to the JNU cabal and we have met in various places. So I'm very delighted to be here. This book is very close to my heart because whatever I am is because I started pursuing and studying this man here. Let me show you a bigger picture of this is V.O. Chidambaram Pillai for you. Before I actually read, perhaps just a few minutes let me take to say that Chidambaram Pillai is unknown outside Tamil Nadu, yes. But in Tamil Nadu itself is a legendary figure. Every town, every city, every neighborhood would have a VOC street, a VOC park, a VOC school, a VOC nagar. So VOC is very well known in Tamil Nadu. Outside Tamil Nadu, of course, nobody knows. There is no street named after V.O. Chidambaram Pillai anywhere in India. There are no statues for him. There are probably a dozen statues for Chidambaram Pillai in Tamil Nadu. So he is remembered. Whenever you mention his name, two images will come to your mind in Tamil Nadu. One is the image of a ship. The other is a oil chucky. Well, very contrasting because one is this august and expensive and grand image of a ship. The second is of the lowly quotidian oil mill. I'll tell you why that oil mill comes to your name. So this book is about why he should be known outside Tamil Nadu, and why he should be known to the younger generation especially. He is known primarily for the subtitle of this book, Vivo Chidambaram Pillai and the Battle Against the British Maritime Empire. So what he sets out to do in 1906 is to start a shipping company to rival the British shipping behemoth, the British India Steam Navigation Company. He was a ardent disciple and follower of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. I'll tell you how much he looked up to Tilak is something very extraordinary. We'll talk about that later. So as part of the Swadeshi movement, he starts the shipping company. And what happened to him and the shipping company is the subject of this book. So who is this man who thinks of this audacious dream of trying to launch nothing less than a shipping company under the greatest odds stacked up against him? So, who was VOC? And how did a small town pleader launch the audacious project of promoting a multi-lakh shipping enterprise? Vivo Chidambaram Pillai was born on 5th September 1872 in Ottapidaram, the taluk headquarters of the same name. Ottapidaram was one of the 10 taluks of Tirunelveli district with a population of barely 4,000. Panchalam Kuruchi, the headquarters of the Palayakkarar chieftain Veerapandiya Kattabomman, who had valiantly fought the British and was martyred in 1799, was 3 kilometers to the north. And VOC took great pride in this geographic proximity. He was a Saiva Vellalar, a landholding caste ranking next only to Brahmins in the hierarchy and boasting of considerable cultural capital. His father, Ulaganatha Pillai, was a pleader himself, who also held briefs for the adjoining Zameen of Ettaipuram. The family was prosperous with considerable land and other assets. What we know of VOC's early education comes from his autobiography. After a traditional education in his hometown, he was sent to Tuticorin at the age of 14. His academic career was nothing to speak of, as he alternated between St. Xavier's High School and Caldwell High School before studying briefly at the Hindu College, Tirunelveli. He matriculated not without some effort and for some time worked as a clerk in a taluk office. All was not well between father and son. The reasons are not specified by VOC, but evidently Ulaganatha Pillai was not happy with the way Chidambaram was shaping. Once, after a particularly furious thrashing at his father's hands, VOC ran away to Madurai, donning the garb of a sannyasi. But he calmed down soon, and his life took a new path. At his father's behest, he went to Tiruchirappalli, where he studied law privately. In 1895, he sat for the pleadership examination and qualified as a second-grade pleader at the relatively older age of 23. After receiving the Vakil Sanad, he appeared in the district munsif's court and his practice flourished. He was soon married to Valliammai. Acting as his moral compass, Valliammai played a huge role in laying the foundation of his transformation into a public figure. Initially, VOC seems to have been the usual Vakil with little scruples, but a change soon overtook him and he began to confront the corrupt local police. In the ensuing tussle, the police foisted a case on him, but VOC worsted them and ensured that a head constable was dismissed. Colored by his experience, VOC held a dim view of police and lawyers, a view that only hardened after his incarceration and being a lifelong political suspect. Perhaps I should stop here.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction. So you've laid out who this person was, something about his character, his combativeness, perhaps from an early age. I was just seeing quickly the famous film Kappalotiya Tamilan with Sivaji Ganesan, and one of the early introductory scenes has Chidambaram Pillai arguing a case against his own father.
Yes.
And I was wondering if maybe that's a bit of poetic license, or maybe it's documented, but there seems to be this strong sense of a charismatic personality, a person who, although, as you say, we don't know much about his early life before he gets into this Swadeshi venture. There is something that stands out about him, some kind of a spark, and I think that spark is reflected in your book. This is a very passionate book. You mentioned that VOC was your boyhood hero, in a sense. And that sense of intense empathy for your protagonist, it runs through the book. So could you, before we get into what he did, would you like to say a bit about how you got interested in him, and what motivated you to spend what turned out to be 4 decades tracking down every possible record, not only about him, but about his company, about all the people who worked for the company in any capacity, all the people who opposed it. It's a fascinating sort of piece of sleuthing, I would say. So how did you get this fascination with?
So I owe it to the history textbooks produced by NCERT. Because there was no reference to V.O. Chidambaram Pillai at all in the NCERT textbook. In fact, South India is largely missing. Subramania Bharati doesn't figure in the textbooks. Veerapandiya Kattabomman doesn't figure in these textbooks. That is how I said, why is this man not in the mainstream history textbooks, while the Tamil textbooks have a story about him. As I said, in Tamil Nadu, he's a legendary figure. If you wanted, who is the epitome of selfless sacrifice and patriotism? If one name has to be given, it would be VOC, Chidambaram Pillai. So I said, we should know more about him. And then I was, as a young boy, like many of my generation, I grew up reading Enid Blyton, Famous Five, all these books, Hardy Boys. And then right at the time when I had graduated to reading Sherlock Holmes, I had also got interested in general books. And biographies, I was fascinated by biographies, especially because I was a puny boy. I was a puny boy with a snotty nose who was good at nothing. If I played cricket, I was out first ball. If I played tops, my other friends would maul my top beyond recognition. So I was a very unhappy child. But reading books, reading the stories of great people, greatly inspired me. And when I read some of these biographies, I used to wonder. One of the biographies that I read was about the father of the Scout movement, Baden Powell. It's a very interesting personality because Rudyard Kipling figures prominently in the Scout movement. Baden Powell spent time in South Africa. He spent time in India. He was an illustrator, artist. He was a leader. So when I read these autobiographies, I used to wonder, why don't we have these kind of well-documented, engagingly written biographies? So there was no such biography of VOC, or for that matter any of the other great leaders. So I said, why not we write one such biography? I immediately started having a scrapbook. A scrapbook is something that the present day students may not know. What we would do is, usually we would use a notebook, probably in the full-scape size composition notebook, which has already been used. You cut pictures from the newspaper. I started with cutting pictures of Gundappa Vishwanath, who is my greatest hero. And I used to hate Sunil Gavaskar. I am Gundappa Vishwanath fan. and B.S. Chandrasekhar fan. So we cut pictures and paste it. But very soon I said I started doing that for Chidambaram Pillai. So getting pictures was very difficult. So once I found a poster where Chidambaram Pillai's picture was there. So I got off the bus, went there, tore that picture very carefully, and that went into the scrapbook. I still have that picture. So I started collecting material, went to libraries and realized that there is very few books on. Then somebody said, if you want to find more about freedom fighters, you have to go to the archives. So I immediately went to the Tamil Nadu archives. I went there, they drove me away because I was in my school uniform in shorts and shirt. They said school children can't come into the archives. So I left the archives, but I went to the various other libraries. The very first year, as soon as I joined college in 1984, I was about 16 and a half. I got permission to go to the Tamil Nadu archives. I plunged into the archives and I got lost in the records. So from there, I collected various material. First in 1984, I put together his Chidambaram Pillai's letters, 43 letters I put together, and it was published in my first year in college. So that set me going. So my primary aim was to first put together all the documents. Indians, especially in those days, we had this view that Indians were no good at documentation, which is largely true. So we believe in hagiographies. We don't want to rely on documents. We don't want to look at the warts and all of our heroes. So I said, first thing we have to do is to put together the documents. And I didn't see myself as a autobiographer at all, because I said, how can one write something big? So at least I will put together these documents. That's how I started. And slowly I realized that I was not cut out to be a bank employee, which is what I wanted to be. Wanted to work in a bank, make money by scowling at people who came to draw their money from their account in your bank. So I thought that's what I wanted to do, but very soon it became clear that history is a very demanding muse. She will not accept part-time suitors. So by the first year in college, it became very clear that I wanted to be a historian. So even as I was studying in college, went to the archives, I went to the libraries, I visited Tuticorin, his hometown.
Over there, I think.
Telling somebody is
over there.
See, second or third image. So I went to Tuticorin. The next, so you can see what is marked as Thoothukudi, deep down south, Tuticorin, that is the town. So in my first year of college, during the summer vacation, I went there. Through my publisher's contact, I stayed with a friend's place. Here I have to say that, now, I have been a full-time academic for now nearly 30 years. Everything is about raising funds, finding money, writing research proposals, writing grants. 42 years of this work, I have not taken any money as any project to do this work. I have been helped by friends, well-wishers, and the families of these friends and well-wishers. People have put me up in their homes. They have given me a roof to stay. They have provided me with food. So I stayed in a friend's place, traveled all over the district, met some of the people who dated to Chidambaram Pillai's times. I will talk about this later. One could write a whole novel about it. So I started amassing this kind of material. Then the next step was, they said there is a place called Teenmurti Bhavan in Delhi, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. There they have lots of private papers and newspapers. I said, okay. Immediately, 1985, second year in college, I produced a fake medical certificate and went off to Teenmurthy Library for 3 weeks. There once again I encountered a problem. They wouldn't let me into the library. They said undergraduate students can't enter this library. So I pleaded with them, somehow got permission. Then I sat through one of the most enriching experiences of my life. Was reading the Swadeshi newspaper, the nationalist newspaper run by G. Subramania Iyer, who also founded the Hindu. So page after page, the microfilms used were so bad, the microfilm readers were so bad, but I was young, so I would spend morning till evening looking at these things, making notes, copying. So after 3 weeks, I had to come back to Chennai. I couldn't go on staying there. So I vowed that next time I came, without looking at the Swadeshi Mitran up to 1936, November 18, the day this man died, I'm not going to leave that place. So 3 years later, I repeated this. Also went to the National Archives. So slowly, one by one, I went there. Finally, some people said, in London you will find more material. So in 1996, as soon as I got my first job, fellowship, so I went to British Library, the Guildhall Library, National Maritime Museum. So one thing led to another, and that is a whole different experience. Going to these repositories, meeting people, talking to people, reading randomly, this and that, reading biography. Chidambaram Pillai is the disciple of Tilak. So you read various biographies of Tilak. Then you read the biographies of Kaparte and Munje. Then you find that Motilal Ghosh, the founder of Amrita Bazar Patrika, has written about Chidambaram Pillai in the newspaper. So immediately you read his memoirs. So this way, from setting out to be a biographer of Chidambaram Pillai, I started reading about the history of Tamil Nadu, the history of the Indian national movement, and then of course you also want to know more about the world. So this is the step-by-step way in which I collected material. But at one point I realized that, rather than wait for some better writer and scholar to come and write this stuff, I thought I should start writing myself. So from 1985-86, I published 3 or 4 books in Tamil. I wrote in Tamil, but at one point I realized that I need some more time. That much more maturity is required, and only then I should write a full-scale book on it. So I have been waiting for this maturity, which is so elusive, it doesn't come. It seems like as if with old age your grey cells only increase. But during the pandemic, it was a moment where you had profound introspection. You said you can't wait endlessly. And then I also said I have to write in English. This man should be known outside the Tamil world. So I am going to write in English, and I am going to choose this particular part. Senior historians, I will not name them, my close friends, well-wishers, they said there is no scope or place for a book on just the history of one shipping company. I disregarded all their advice. I said that is the story. The story of the shipping company and what he did with the shipping company is the story. So I sat on it and I wrote this book. I took a year to draft this, and then late last year it was published. So that is how it came to be written.
What a fascinating story. I think there's a lot there. I think not only did you manage to write a whole book about this one company, the entire book, 400 and something pages, is about a period of 3 years, 3 or 4 years, which was the duration for which the company lasted. And we'll come to the reason why it didn't go beyond that. But the amazing sort of blow-by-blow account that you have managed to piece together, I think your explanation sort of it tells us how you managed to do that, because almost everything that was written in the Hindu or India, that is Subramanya Bharati's paper, or Amrit Bazar Patrika, or Swadeshi Mitran, you have your own archive of all of these reports on this company, on Bausi, and so on. So I think that's fascinating, just for those who, students here, etc. The allure of archival work and the intense rewards that one gets. Also, I think what a wonderful advertisement for the art of biography. I mean, here is someone who's interested in one person and then uses that as a window into an entire field and into understanding, much larger questions of history. And I think we'll move from that into my next question, which is about, can you lay out the moment for us in history when the Swadeshi movement, the partition of Bengal, the Swadeshi movement, and V.O. Chidambaram Pillai goes from being this small town pleader, as you describe him, to this audacious, I think use the word impresario in another place, which perfectly captures what he's doing, because for 3 years he's crisscrossing the Tamil country, he's raising shares, he's giving speeches, this dramatic transformation which happens seemingly overnight. So can you paint a picture for us of what's happening in Tamil Nadu at that time, in Madras presidency, in Tuticorin, where he is from, what the concerns are, etc.
In the late 19th century, South India, it used to be called Madras Presidency, which practically covered the entire peninsular India except, Travancore state, Mysore state, Cochin, Zamorin, and the Hyderabad, Nizam's rule. Otherwise, entire southern India went by Madras Presidency, and that's why until a very long time ago, South Indians to this day are called Madrasis. In North India, you know that. It really gets the goat of everybody. Telugus, Malayalis, Kannadigas say, why do you call us Madrasis? Madrasis themselves don't like to be called as Madrasis. Okay? And in the late 19th century, Madras Presidency was referred to as the benighted province. It was also called the Sleepy Hollow. So it was supposed to be a dead place where nothing happened. When the 1857 revolt took place, there was not a murmur of protest in South India. So that was the reputation it had, but which is not quite right, because probably the greatest nationalist newspaper, the Hindu, came from Madras. G. Subramanya Iyer wrote a book, some economic aspects of British rule in India, which is as good as Dadabhai Nauroji's book. Gujaratis, please don't take offense. It's as good a book as any other book. But this was the reputation it had for variety of reasons. So but when the nationalist movement, Bengal becomes the seed bed of the nationalist movement. It far outstrips all other regions of India in nationalist activity, and then that impels the British to partition Bengal, hoping to weaken the nationalist movement, and out of this, the Swadeshi movement emerges. This is all textbook stuff. And out of the Swadeshi movement, the big programmatic aspects of the Swadeshi movement was to encourage indigenous enterprise, Swadeshi enterprise, boycott foreign goods, and encourage national education. So this was the thing. But when they actually talked about Swadeshi enterprise, given those times, I'm not running down our forebears, they lived through different times, they faced different challenges. But given the conditions of those times, what Swadeshi enterprise meant in those days was, making Swadeshi needles, Swadeshi pins, Swadeshi buttons, Swadeshi soap. This is what Swadeshi bangles. This is what actually Swadeshi movement meant. But in this, even this was much stronger in Bengal, and not in other parts of India. A little bit in Bombay, little bit in Punjab, some in Madras city. But out of the blue, Chidambaram Pillai, VOC, thinks of Swadeshi shipping enterprise. Now, to this day, I am not able to even imagine how we got this idea. What is the scale of investment that is involved? So, to give one instance, when he started the shipping company, he made it into a public limited company. He registered it in Tuticorin. I checked recently with my friends in Tuticorin. In the last few years, now in 2024, barely 1 or 2 public limited companies have been registered in Tuticorin and Tirunelveli. 100 years later. So this was what he was thinking of. We still have no clue to how we hit upon this idea, but the context was this. So you have to go back a little in history. If I take too much time, you let me know.
Okay.
So the entire trade, shipping, maritime activity had been completely taken over by the British. After steam ships were invented, the British outstripped any other country both in the naval power and in the mercantile marine power. So in India itself, 2 huge companies, the British India Steam Navigation Company and then the Peninsular and Oriental Navigation Company, together they completely dominated all the seas. Entire Indian Ocean trade was taken over by the British. Nobody to really compete with them. And what they did was they systematically destroyed all the small ports on the Coromandel coast. From a time when there were small ports where native vessels could transport freight and passengers over short distances, were destroyed. They also built the South Indian Railway to ensure that the hinterland was connected to the ports. The long and short of it is that by the 1870s, 1880s, there is nobody to compete with them. The entire mail contract of the government of India was with British India Steam Navigation Company. The entire movement of troops was through the British Indian shipping ships. The entire indentured labor, passenger traffic moved in these ships. Entire freight was moved in these ships. So all the small enterprises, native crafts were all destroyed. And in Tuticorin itself, that is the base for Chidambaram Pillai, where, as I read out a little while ago, 1900, he is a small-time pleader. So there is a very active trade going on between Thoothukudi and Colombo. In fact, Thoothukudi was probably the 5th or the 6th largest port in undivided India. So this traffic was fully controlled by the British India Steam Navigation Company ships. There was no other way to transport the goods, and there all the officials, the agents, the shipping agents, port officer, medical officers, they were all Scottish, they were all British. And not only did they have a monopoly on the shipping, they also, everyday racial slurs and insults were very common. That really, annoyed the traders. So in the context of the Swadeshi movement, we don't know what happens in that one particular moment. In March 1906, you find this sudden reports in newspapers about one V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, who is talking about trying to start some Swadeshi shipping line. Nobody takes it seriously in the beginning. Nobody can even dream that some dark-skinned man of height of 4 feet 4 inches, 5 feet 4 inches or 5 inches is going to challenge the white sahibs. But very quickly we find that first he charters a ship. The chartered ship does well for a few months. So when it does well, immediately it is sabotaged. And when it is sabotaged, that is the key moment. When he actually sets out to do this, as is very common, I have experienced this in my life, you have seen it. If you talk about anything big, what will the people around you tell you? Will they encourage you or will they discourage you? What is the Indian trait? South Indian, North Indian, Bang, Madrasi, Odisha, we are united, truly united in this. Come on, this is not what we can do. Big things, try to do something small, manageable. The same thing happens to Chidambaram Pillai. People who are around him tell him that, these are big things, don't even talk about it. Let us be subservient and we'll do this. So what this man does is, once the chartered ship is sabotaged, he proposes to the traders that if we can't charter ships, basically saying if they won't give us bread, we will actually demand cakes. He said, we will buy a ship. And when they ask him, did we hear you right? Are we going to buy a ship? Chidambaram Pillai says, no, I am not going to buy a ship. I am going to buy 2 ships. And then when they ask him, how are you going to do that? Then he comes up with this next bombshell. He said, I am going to register a public limited company. I said, how do you register a public limited company? Imagine 100 years ago in a remote corner, small-time pleader, who is going to help him draft prospectuses, memorandum of association, articles of association. So this man is the 2 aspects of Chidambaram Pillai that I found most fascinating is, one is he's a man of action. Everywhere what you see is he is acting, he is not talking. But that is a big disadvantage for the historian, because he doesn't talk, you don't get any material. And I'll come back to you, there is a jinx in this project, I'll come to it later. So he doesn't talk, he acts. But at the same time, he also has a foresight. So this is where I want to take a few minutes to talk about the prospectus. So he drafts a prospectus, and prospectus meant to tell the public what this company is about, what is its capital outlay, how is he going to work, all these things. And in this prospectus, this is completely inconceivable to me. He is not just saying that I am going to raise capital, buy ships and transport passengers and goods. He said, first thing he says is, this will be first it's a Swadeshi company. It is emblazoned on the title, Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. All the stationery has Vande Mataram stamped on it. Okay? Then the next thing he does is, he says that shareholding will be limited to non-Europeans. Europeans cannot buy shares in this company. That is the first thing he said. Then he says, as far as possible, we will run the ships with Indian sailors. Remember, shipping was an international trade. Not anybody could, captain a ship or be an engineer of a ship. They had to be certified, and all the certifying agencies were in Europe and in Japan. So he said we would try as far as possible to get non-European captains and sailors. He's not successful in that, but he makes that statement of intent. And the next thing he says is, this is the situation now. Very soon we will try to start institutions to train Indians and Asians in the art of navigation. Now I'll tell you why this is so idealistic and so far-sighted. Many of you would be familiar with the Indian Maritime University, right? Indian Maritime University. When was it started? started in 2007. 101 years after this man dreamt of this. It takes 60 years of independent India to actually realize this dream. He doesn't stop there. He said, as a stopgap arrangement, I am going to institute scholarships for Indian students to be trained. Then the next step he goes on to say that we will not stop here. We will need to have dockyards to repair ships. And then he goes one step further and says the next step for us is to actually have dry dockyards to build ships. So when his idea is not just to run a couple of ships, transport freight, and make Swadeshi just a business proposition. He's looking far ahead. And that's what gets him into
trouble.
Deep trouble.
Great. So you've left us at that point where he's making this statement of intent, and I think you make the point that, of course, this was not the only Swadeshi attempt at running a shipping line. There were a few in Bengal. I think there was, before and after him, there was some on the western coast. But what really makes him sets him apart is precisely this explicit statement of intent to be a Swadeshi company, in the sense of competing with and dislodging the monopoly of the BI company and the PO, which eventually merged among themselves. And there seems to be almost a kind of, at every step, when he has the opportunity to be diplomatic and to soft pedal his sort of criticism of the British company, he takes the alternative, which is to go all out, even when he knows that the consequence is likely to be serious. And then he becomes more and more involved in politics, and then getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but eventually as his venture starts to get some traction, he is charged with sedition and ultimately put in jail for 4 years. But here's a counter question, and this is a counter question that came from, as you beautifully show, from other directors within his own company, more moderate faction led by K.R. Guruswamy Iyer, I think. And they're saying that if you play it a little more smartly, you can maybe make this business venture last longer. And I think even later, during one of the later inquiries, Lalubhai Samaldas makes the same point. And look at Walchan, look at others, they managed to, have a part-way success by not ruffling the feathers too much. Do you think that could have happened with SS & Co? But more importantly, do you think that would have been a desirable outcome at all for the purposes of Pillai?
This is a very tricky question. Do we want heroic failures, or you want to have tame small victories? Do you want to go down with guns blazing, or do you want to seize small victories? So this is always a difficult question to answer. The chicken on the kuttichuvar, the broken ruined wall, will always ridicule the eagle which is trying to soar up into the skies. We don't judge the soaring eagle by the standards of the morning roosters. So that is the second issue, is that what was success? What was his goal? Was Chidambaram Pillai's goal to run a successful shipping company and declare dividends? Was that his goal? That was not his goal. Then thirdly, there is another criticism that comes up during that time itself. People also talked about his inexperience. They said if they had more experience, it would happen. But the point is, where do you get experience? How do you learn to swim without taking the plunge? When the odds are stacked against you. So his objective was political. His idea was to challenge British supremacy in the maritime field. That's what he started out to do. But perhaps, I am sure, he would have known that it would have been a showdown was inevitable. But it is possible that, the showdown came much earlier than later. See, the turning point was the Gujarat has a very important part to play in it. The Surat session of the Indian National Congress was the turning point. So the Congress session was supposed to have taken place in Nagpur, which would have given Tilak and his camp, the so-called extremist camp, the edge. So undercut them, it was held in Surat. Chidambaram Pillai came there. He played a very important part, and that is where he first met Tilak, Aurobindo, Motilal Ghosh and everybody, and that is where he becomes even more radical. So he goes back from Surat, end of December. Within the next 2.5 months, Tuticorin becomes it catches all India attention. It is ablaze. The Swadeshi movement itself, becomes very, it gets accelerated, and everything comes to a head by mid-1908. VOC is arrested. Tilak is arrested. The leaders in Bengal are quelled. So all these are not things which were in Chidambaram Pillai's hands. So, but all said and done, his idea was, it was a political struggle altogether. He was not fooling anybody. He was not making false promises. From the prospectus down to the last statement that he makes, he said he called upon people to invest, not by promising that, he was not Harshad Mehta, he was not anybody else to promise big dividends. He was saying, by investing in this, you are investing in a nationalist cause. So if he had actually not done that, he would have actually betrayed the things. So this is the crux. And I would say that, yes, the people who trusted him, people who went behind him, paid a heavy price. VOC himself paid a very heavy price. His family paid a heavy price. But that is what heroes are made about. Without such heroes, we would be such a impoverished society. A society without heroes. Heroes who are strong heroes with noble ideals, not fishy people with suspect ideals. People who are willing to stake everything and stand when on the burning deck. They are the ones who inspire next generation. We cannot always be talking about this moment, now and here. What makes human society what it is about something. When Icarus tries to fly, well, everybody says you are going to die, but he tries. So we remember Icarus. I would say that is what is central to the project. It was a political project. It was a nationalist project from start to finish. And Chidambaram Pillai didn't flinch. Certain things were not in his control.
Absolutely. So I think clearly looking at this from the lens of a business case is not the right way to go about it.
That I might add something. This is a senior businessman posed this question to me in a meeting. He said, with some experience, could he not have the company have won? I asked, have the businesses started by all IIM graduates been successful? How many have failed? How many companies have failed? India has more sick industries than any other country, but there are no sick industrialists. If shipping failed, Chidambaram Pillai's life was, spent in abject poverty. So there is no surefire recipe for commercial and economic success. He did what he promised. He may not have delivered, but it is a heroic failure that inspires everybody.
So we're sort of got about, I think, 10 more minutes before we open it up to questions. So I'll keep my questions a little shorter and choose only some of them. I just wanted to say and also make a couple of points, comments. What I really enjoyed about the book is, although it's about this heroic figure, it really is social history of Tuticorin and Tirunelveli district, and tells us so much about so many other figures, Panditurai Devar, S.D. Krishna Iyengar, also Bharati, of course, about whom you have written extensively elsewhere. But this, the interaction between all of these figures, and what's fascinating about it is that Pillai builds this, Chidambaram Pillai builds this coalition across communities, Brahmins, Vellalars, Maraikayars, Christians, and he's able to unite all of these different communities, and some people saw it as still as an elite activity, but even that he went beyond when he headed the labor strike in the coral mills, and perhaps had he been given more time, he would have really turned it into a much more mass sort of a movement. So it's an extraordinary political achievement. We talk about someone who doesn't have business experience, but also doesn't have political experience. And for someone like that, it's quite an extraordinary achievement. I think what you also convey so vividly is the oppressive atmosphere in terms of business competition. And you talked about the behemoth that he was taking on. So not only did they launch a very, very ruthless rate war by slashing their rates in a way that this newcomer could never hope to compete, you show through your sources it's extraordinary the level of surveillance that was going on. Every little meeting, every little interaction between the board members, speech given by directors, all of this is documented in police files and so on. And you make such good use of this material. I wanted to just ask how, maybe very briefly, how does one or how did you go about reading against the grain? Because obviously a lot of your material is coming from these police reports, which are to a large extent biased or have their own prejudices, and yet we need to rely on them for some information. So how do you go about reading between the lines when you use that?
So I earlier referred to the jinx. So it's almost, it's unbelievable. The kind of ill luck and misfortune that not only plagued Chidambaram Pillai, but also the researcher who followed in his footsteps. So wherever you go, you will find that the records have been lost or misplaced or thrown away just before you have reached that place. Okay, I once went looking traced the family of a person who had worked with Chidambaram Pillai. I went to his house and I asked for him. The man said, used an abusive word, if you want to talk about my rascal father, you don't step into my house. He was so angry with his father, so he didn't want to even mention the name. Then when you go into the library, I'll tell you, Swadeshi Mitran is the major newspaper, right? For the entire year of 1907, which is the crucial year for the Swadeshi movement, not a single paper is available. Okay? Then for Subramanya Bharati's weekly, similarly, the even more crucial period from 1907 to 1908, that year, newspaper is not available. Then it is made worse by two events that take place during this time. So when the British government decides that Chidambaram Pillai has to be silenced, he has to be put behind bars, he is charged with sedition, and he is given 2 life imprisonments. You heard me right. A man has only one life, but he was given 2 life imprisonments. The moment this sentence was pronounced, half of his friends left him, destroyed whatever papers were with them. Okay, all these papers were burnt, torn, etc. Then 3 years later, to make matters even worse, Robert Ashe, the collector who played a big role in crushing the Swadeshi Company, he was assassinated by a revolutionary. So this was the only political assassination in Madras presidency during the entire freedom struggle. So it really instilled the fear of God in the people who are involved in the Swadeshi movement. So what little material was left behind, they were also destroyed. So by the time we wanted to do research, nobody had any documents. Nobody wanted to talk about it. The stories were not passed down to their children and grandchildren. So what we had left behind was police records, government proceedings, notes and minutes taken in the governing council. Here once again, we cannot blame anybody else but ourselves. The records that I saw 30-40 years ago now cannot be traced. I don't know where they are. You cannot find them in the places where I saw them. They are all supposed to be public repositories where they should have been preserved. Some of them were in very bad shape. So scattered records. And also, one thing I pitied not only Chidambaram Pillai but also pitied the CID police constable who was put on his tracks. This man, I think, kept this police constable on the feet because he is traveling all the time. He is always speaking, he is always discussing things, he is moving from one place to another. Poor fellow, this constable must have had a very tough time. But good thing is they made a record of everything. But you have to be very careful. They are biased reports. And also, the reports will go only thus far. Let us say Chidambaram Pillai went to meet Aparajita Ramnath. What exactly transpired between the two will not be known to the police constable. But through these little bits of information. So in fact, when I wrote this manuscript, my challenge was this. What I have is, literally probably at a very conservative estimate, I think there are about 1,200 or 1,300 references in my book. So it basically means that based on about 1,200 discrete bits of information, I have to write the story. Until the very end, I did not have a narrative, any contemporary narrative except one or two from the courts and one or two other sources. There were no narratives. All of them were tidbits. It was like one huge jigsaw puzzle. The only difference being that the jigsaw puzzle, the maker of the jigsaw puzzle knows the big picture. I don't have that picture. Only luckily much later one particular narrative that I got, I know I am digressing a bit, but that will address something that you mentioned. So you talked about, if they had soft pedaled, would it have been a success? I'll take the case of the Gujarati businessman, Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. In 1919, Gujarati businessmen, 4 of them, Balchand Hirachand, Narottam Morarji, Lallubai Samaldas, Mansukram Matmaram Master, now 4 of them get together to start the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. They have deep pockets. They all have interest in the textile business. They have money. But when they started in 1919, when the mood had changed, because during the First World War, Britain realized that if you keep your empire, colonies weak, you cannot fight a world war. And they especially found that, the seas became treacherous. So they were in a mood to, encourage indigenous enterprise to a certain extent. So they start the company. Immediately they run into trouble with the same British India Steam Navigation Company. Only that this monster has now become even bigger. It has merged with P&O. BI company has now merged with P&O. Something like, Amazon and Apple or whatever, merging. And when Narottam Morarji goes to London and meets Lord Inchcape and tries to, talk to them, he said, why are you trying to crush us? You know what this man tells him, Lord Inchcape? He says, first, 1922, he refuses to meet him. So much for people, suggesting that Chidambaram Pillai should go and negotiate. Inchcape doesn't want to talk to him. Then a year later, when he actually gives him an audience, what is the suggestion he makes? He says, sell your company to me. Why do you want to compete with me? Then subsequently, through tortuous negotiations, they come to an agreement. The agreement is a terrible agreement, which Narottam Morarji says that agreement was a slavery bond. That is the word he uses. He signs a slavery bond for 10 years so that the BI company will not crush this India company. So these were not, a BI company backed by British imperialist interests. They were not known to have, even a drop of, they're completely hard-hearted. So they had such a tough time. Okay, now what happened? This is one of the dramatic moments of the story which I say towards the end. This is straight out of a movie. So one challenge that I had was, when I was writing, I was completely overwhelmed with emotion. But when people read them, some of them, first thing is, my editors did not believe. First they asked, is this a real story? Did this actually happen? Did this actually happen, or are you making it up? Well, there are 1,200 references, you can check it. It actually happened. But I'll tell you one of the things, you can't believe it, straight out of a movie. 1924, the Mercantile Marine Committee is constituted by the British government to look at problems of Indian shipping. So the committee comes, many people go and give evidence. One of the members of the committee is the managing director of the BI company, the one who is responsible for crushing so many. Don't get me wrong, he was guilty of the crime of crushing not just the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. He has many other such trophies in his pocket. So he is there in the committee, and who comes to give evidence? The secretary of the Swadeshi Company, after Chidambaram Pillai had been arrested. He is the one who goes to give evidence. That entire exchange is recorded. I tell you, Javed Akhtar could not produce a better dialogue, exchange and script. Sparks fly. In fact, it is so harsh. Finally, the chairman says, do you want to retract your written statement? So powerful. And not only that, the BI company, how vindictive they were. Such a huge company with literally hundreds of ships. He comes to the meeting with documents from 16 years ago. He comes with the balance sheet of the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company. So he was not leaving anything to chance. He was confronting the witness with documents from many years ago. So they were vindictive, vengeful, hard-hearted, petty-minded. So that is the that is one. These are one of the lucky moments. But generally, it is all ill luck. To give you only one instance. So initially, one of the places where I looked for, there are students here. You must look up the Madras Asylum Press Almanac. It's a yearly volume running into 1,500, 2,000 pages. It has, the amazing amount of data. Okay, one of the sections is about the joint stock companies, the various joint stock companies registered during that year and their paid up capital. Okay, so the Swadeshi company is liquidated in 1911. So from 1906 I am tracing the paid up capital. So every year the paid up capital goes. The last year, what happens? It is in lakhs. So it is a 6-figure sum. You know the old typeface? The type can fall off so that the number can go missing. Of the 6 digits, which digit went missing? Tell me, with my luck and Chidambaram Pillai's luck, which digit would have been lost? The lakh.
The first.
Yes, the first one. The last digit could have fallen off. The next one could have fallen. The 100th one could have fallen off. 1,000th one could have. 10,000th one could have fallen off. The luck of our hero. Can you please, I want to show one more image. One more anecdote I want to say, and then I would try to stop. So, this man's luck is that, I was shouting in rage. But luckily later, many years later, I found other documents. Now we know how much. But to this day, let me say, the liquidation records I have not been able to trace. Since I have said, given you all these unlucky, jinxed moments, I want to end with this image, which is somewhat lucky, which I almost squandered. That luck I almost squandered. So let me give you this story. Okay, this is the image. Okay, it's not a great image. And you are going to wonder, what is this visiting academic senior professor comes with a PPT where there are only 4 images. It's so amateurish. Huh? And that one image is there, it's not clear. You can't make out whether it's fish or fowl. So it is a ship. So what is so great about this image? And this is where my luck played. 40 years ago, I almost did not make a copy of this image. Why? Because I wanted to save 1 rupee. And that 1 rupee was a huge sum. My pocket money in those days was 5 rupees a day. So I found the prospectus, the very first prospectus. It was a 4-page prospectus, 3 pages of text. The cover page has this image. So I said, okay, let me photocopy the prospectus, the written text. This is just an image, doesn't look very nice also. Why spend that 1 rupee? I want to have my dosa in the evening for tiffin. Masala dosa is 1.5 rupees. So dosa I can have. So I went to the photocopying shop. I made photocopies of the 3 other pages. I didn't want to photocopy the last image. Then at a last moment, I said, okay, let me get the whole document, and I photocopied this. Why I tell you this story is, that document which I saw 40 years ago doesn't exist anymore. The British crushed the shipping navigation company. We Indians destroyed all other documents that were left behind. Our apathy is worse than the vengeance of BI company. So this image is, as far as I know, the only surviving picture of that ship one of the two ships that Chidambaram Pillai bought. So here I think luck kind of favored me. At least wisdom prevailed over me. I decided that, this image was worth more than a plain dosa.
The masala that you missed.
Masala I've now added to the story. No, this is no exaggeration. This is exactly how it happened. The most tragic part of this story is that documents that I saw 40 years ago, many of those documents are either untraceable, destroyed, lost, or have disappeared or vanished. And this is an unconscionable crime that we Indians are committing.
Thank you for, I think we have come towards the point where we should take audience questions. Safwan, is it okay, since we started a little late, if we go up to 5:45, is it okay? This being an Indian Ocean sort of forum, I think it would be great if we could also broaden out and think about the impact of this story on our understanding of the broader Indian Ocean world and so on. I'm sure that will come up in some of the questions. Can we start with questions in the room and then go online?
You might have to use a mic. Just use the mic because it's also hybrid.
The Tuticorin port has been requisitioned VOC port, right? So it says Chidambaranar. So why that difference?
Okay. So this is a simple question. So Pillai is a caste surname, and some people are not very comfortable using that name. So stopped there. That Pillai has been dropped. So we call it VO Chidambaranar. AR is the honorific suffix. But generally in Tamil Nadu, what we do is we call him VOC by his initials, in English VOC. That is the story. My own view is that we should not mess with the names of our ancestors. That's what they were called, that's how they were known. It's better we don't, change these things. But it's okay, it can be called VOC Port. Now, earlier it was called VOC Port Trust. Now it is called the VOC Port Authority.
Thank you for a wonderfully interesting, very fascinating, also gives you the chills when you think about, like you're saying, the document. But you talked about not wanting to be a biographer, and you started accumulating information at an incredibly young, and you use the word mature, so I'd say before you had the maturity to realize that these could have. So what made you start to collect? I mean, that's really long vision, considering the book just came out now, and you and I are of a generation. And when you started collecting the material, what gave you that?
Okay.
I mean, you were in your teens.
So the idea was that, I want to do something worthwhile. I thought this was a very worthwhile thing to do. Some completely useless, was no good at anything. So I thought I would put together this material and somebody else would write it. But I realized very soon that, this is my experience. One part of my work is actual writing as a historian. I've also published many volumes of documents. So the whole list of them, I'll give it to you later. But what I have been sadly disappointed is that very few historians, very few scholars have actually made use of the documents that I have put together. So invariably, I am the one who has had to use this material into writing. So that was the initial stage. But slowly, I said I should make use of this material, try to write good narratives. One thing I have been very clear is that I try to communicate whatever the excitement, the exhilaration that I experienced. I want to communicate. That is the idea. Nothing more. I am not looking at what are the protocols of my academic discipline. How are my peers going to judge me? You see, one very nice part of India, especially Indian academics, is that if you are not rewarded for good work, neither are you punished for bad work. This is the greatness about Indian academics. So many, thousands and thousands of Indian teachers are drawing salaries from public money without showing anything back in return. So, but one advantage of it is that, you can either not work or you can do anything you want. So I have had the privilege of what I thought was worthwhile things. Every little document, important document that I came across, useful documents, I have, instead of just putting it out, because that is a very sad thing to do. An unorganized set of documents might as well not exist. Like we say, but standard opening gambit to my students, I ask them what is a library. The immediate response they would say is, a library is a collection of books. I tell them it's wrong. A library is an organized collection of books. But if you apply this definition, most libraries in India would not make the cut, right? They just throw books around. Books are meant only to line the pockets of the administrators, the workers, the staff. How many of you have had good experience with library staff? We have all been to so many libraries. This is talking about exam. That's why we are here. MIDS is a great library. We value these libraries. Why? Because we have seen so many bad libraries. So documents, I put together these documents in a meaningfully organized manner. So I have done that also. And every little, in most of my books in Tamil, 1/3 of the book would have actual reproductions of documents. Because I want people to know on what evidence I have written this, and second, better scholars will make better use of this material. That is the hope, and that is how I have done it. I hope to do more of that.
Wonderful lecture. Thank you so much. I have one question. Who were the people who were stockholders of the Swadeshi company? Were there lots of people? Were there just a few rich families? What was the impact of that?
Okay. So we are talking about the early 20th century, where very few Indians had capital cash to spare. The first set were local traders. The next batch were bankers from the adjoining headquarters. This went nowhere near the kind of capital required. But right from the beginning, it was an all India enterprise. The advertisement for the shipping company appeared in newspapers across the world, across India, Calcutta, Bombay. I have seen Calcutta, Bombay and other parts. We have branch offices were opened in Madras city, Calcutta and Bombay. But all of this did not add too much. So this man also went around addressing public meetings, raising money from the common people. But the problem was that most of these people were at best able to make only, each share was 25 rupees. Now, what does 25 rupees meant in 1906? A sovereign of gold cost 10 rupees. The salary of a school teacher was about 20-25 rupees. So basically, very few could afford it. But because of the great campaign that Chidambaram Pillai led, as I said, this was not launched as a business venture. He appealed to patriotic sentiment. So many people just paid the initial call of 5 rupees. They didn't end up paying up the full capital. There were also people who just donated money. People said donated 25, 4 annas, 8 annas, 1 rupee. So all kinds of money came. So finally, the final total was in the range of about, I have the figures, 7.2 lakhs or something. That was what they could manage over this 4-year period. Cash flow was a big problem, and one of the biggest issues that they faced was that the interest on buying the ships turned out to be very high. There turned out to be repairs in the ship, so it was a very complicated thing. Raising money was a Himalayan task, but that was not the only task. It was almost, you would feel that, when Chidambaram Pillai went to prison, he must have thought, what a relief it is. And this is where, before we forget, why did I mention the magisterial ship and the lowly oil chakki together? Okay, this man was given 2 life imprisonments. Just for a sense of comparison and proportion, his guru Tilak got 6 years, right? So this is the comparison. And when he was put in prison, he was made. So how are the oil mills pulled? What is the motive force for oil mills? Bulls, right? Bulls. Bulls apparently were in short supply in Coimbatore jail. They made this man pull the oil mill. He quite literally pulled the oil mill. They tried everything to break his resolve. They didn't succeed. Who succeeded? The people whom he relied on. They broke his resolve. So that is why people in Tamil Nadu remember the metaphor for Chidambaram Pillai is the ship, the couple and the sickle.
I was just wondering, you mentioned people who supported and people who paid up, who subscribed to the shares. But there's very interesting mention you make also that there's diaspora in South Africa and Sri Lanka and
Yes.
other places who also paid up.
Yeah, I'm sorry for, but thanks for reminding me. Money, some shares were sold in Burma, some in Singapore, some went to Malaya. Lots of people from Colombo merchants, then some from South Africa. So when Chidambaram Pillai's wife, another day I will have to give a full story of his wife, because if there is a bigger hero than this man, his wife is that hero. Much bigger than this man. So when she tried to raise money for the defense fund, people from South Africa, the indentured labor in South Africa, they sent money. And if you look at their names, coolie workers, barbers, petty shop owners, these are the people who contributed money. They didn't ask whether money was going to, to buy shares or buy ships or buy whatever. They said, this is a patriotic cause, we are going to give it to him. That's what. It's actually I'm sorry, I should have emphasized this. The South African connection was very important. If it comes up, I'll give one more link to the South African story.
Thank you so much, sir. I had two very small questions. The first question was, this is a 4-decade-long passion project, so with 1,200 references. So my first question was, how do you know that, okay, this is enough, like over like a 4-decade-long research project, like, okay, this is enough for the... And my second question was, I was just seeing like parallels to the contemporary, like, I mean, the idea of technology and the company being used for nationalist purpose, like for deeply political purpose. Do you see any parallels in the contemporary times of like this amalgamation of technology and companies being used for a distinctly political purpose? I mean, those were my two questions.
So the first question is, I think the gravitas is actually becoming overwhelming. So to ease in the charged atmosphere, you can say it's like research is never finished. It is only abandoned. Okay. So at some point, you should choose that point when to abandon it. But in this case, what happened was, because this is a journey, whatever I would not be here in this place if where my siblings are, where my larger extended family are, if that is any indication, I should not be here. I should not be, writing I don't come from a family where, we have this kind of cultural capital. But writing books, publishing with Penguin, going to the best libraries in the world, this is not what I come from. But I've become this because of Chidambaram Pillai. This journey has taken me there. But at one point, I went on doing my work. Wherever I went, I looked for this material. But the pandemic was a turning point. Ideally, I would have preferred to have chosen the time to write it. But destiny has other ideas. So pandemic, suddenly, you feel very mortal. And then you say, what are you going to do with this kind of, you have to do something. And then I also realized that, enough has been said about this man in Tamil. As I said, every neighborhood has a VOC street. I am not going to add to this. So I want to take this story to the larger. And I think it comes down to the second part of your question. I am at an age where, I should be saying this world is going to the dogs. The young people are not reading. The youths are useless. Their attention span is only 10 seconds. I don't think so. I actually see that in the last 5 to 10 years, great interest among the younger generation in a variety of things. Their talents have been opened up, avenues have been opened up. But there's still, there's probably a lack of purpose or looking at a big objective. I would think that, these kind of heroic failures, perhaps there could be, this would inspire the next generation to think big. Why should we not think big? I think that perhaps is what, and also, perhaps, underline the importance of morals, ethics. So towards the end of the book, I surmise, I ask, Chidambaram Pillai did not go back to his old haunt for 20 years. The town and city where he was an unchallenged hero, where the British police, had no control over that city for a week. That uncrowned king of that town, he didn't go back to that town for 20 years. I have speculated why. One of the reasons I think was that, we don't know, but he was an honorable man. Rightly or wrongly, he must have believed that the people who invested in that company, yes, they were patriotic, they were committed to the Swadeshi cause, it was a public limited company, no individual is responsible. But ultimately, people put their money in because of this man. And he must have felt that, that money was all lost. And perhaps he felt morally and ethically responsible. If we had that sense of every person who draws even a single rupee from public money, and here I would put this thing before our teachers who are paid with public money, what are they doing? If they did that job better, not only our country, the entire world would be a better place. So this, I would say, is what we can learn from VOC's life.
Safwan, I gather there are no questions online, right?
Yeah, I think
No. I'm saying that we'll continue with the room in that case.
we don't have any online. So thank you so much for a wonderful book discussion this afternoon. My question is, or rather hunch is, the very foundation of the British Empire or British domination over Asia and elsewhere in the world stemmed from their control over the oceanic route. Do you get a sense that this man, V.O. Chidambaram, got kind of a plan or perhaps a sense that he's going to undercut the very foundation on which the entire edifice actually was erected? And my second related to this is a counterfactual question. What do you think, if it would have succeeded, what shape it would have taken in terms of undercutting the British dominance over the coming years or decades?
Okay, so as I said, too many things happened too soon and too fast. Okay, this is within a period of 2 years, the whole drama had been played out before anybody could even realize what was happening. But so there was no place, space and time to sit, think and reflect. But if whatever documents we have, whatever he has said in the prospectus and whatever he said in his public speeches, which are all well documented, it's very clear that he understands what the empire is, what was at the root of the empire, how powerful it was, what sustained it, what was the link between commercial interests and imperial interests. All these things are beyond doubt. Perhaps he is not writing a treatise on it, but it is very clear. And there is also a very clear sense of what was this was part of the nationalist discourse, the glories of India's past and our fall later, and the resonance, the reverberations of what happened in the Russo-Japanese War, the revival of the East. These were all part of his the world in which he lived. So he makes it very clear that he is following all the newspapers of the world. And if you read some of the editorials that were written in the Hindu or the Maratha, or the level of Indian journalism was of a very different order. And if you read some of Tilak's editorials, he is literally writing on the knife's edge. Just one little shift, it would become seditious. But there's no doubt what he's saying. So powerfully written, so beautifully articulated. This is in English. I don't know how he writes in Marathi. It must be of an even higher order. So these people were steeped in this discourse. So there's no doubt about that. But they were not writing about that, articulating it in well-formed essays. So that is where, the third element in the Swadeshi program was national education. I said with the education that deracinated you, you couldn't think in these terms. So he was very much steeped in this thing, except that it was not all that well articulated. The second part was counterfactual. I'll put it this way, it is not a counterfactual question at all. I've clearly given you the evidence of Scindia Steam Navigation Company. Whatever Scindia Steam Navigation Company did was what was advised. That was the advice given to Chidambaram Pillai. He said you should have raised more capital. They raised more capital. He said you should downplay Swadeshism. They downplayed Swadeshism. He said you should go for negotiation. They went for negotiation. He said you should have more able hands. They had more able hands. All the advice that was given to Chidambaram Pillai was carried out by this India Steam Navigation Company. And I would say that, very clearly, all the founding fathers of this India Steam Navigation Company had learnt the lessons from Chidambaram Pillai. They take their name. His name is taken by all of them. They make reference to it. What was the outcome? Was it an unqualified success? It is out there. Your judgment is as good as mine or even better than mine, because you have even a longer understanding of what happened in the oceanic trade. So in that sense, we have to invoke once again, E.P. Thompson. You have to know the enormous condescension of posterity. Somebody might think he was deluded, but he lived through his times and he did a great job. And I don't think Scindias are any more bigger heroes than Chidambaram Pillai was, or any more successful than.
So thank you. I think the ocean is clearly at the heart of this story. There's a lot of a clear sense of how happenings in South Africa, Sri Lanka, even Japan, Meiji Japan, who's very, very keen on regaining control of the seas, and that's one of their planks, influences the story in subtle ways. I really enjoyed the style of the book. It's very conversational. It hides it successfully masks the difficulty of accessing sources which you described and gives a very fluent narrative. And what I really like is the nautical metaphors that go throughout. So your chapters titled "Full Steam Ahead," "A Rough Crossing," "Dire Straits," "Maroon," and my favorite, "Floating a Company." I think on that note, I invite you all to embark on a voyage. There are books over here, and we are very, very grateful to Professor Chalapathy for his time. Thank you so much, and thank you.